welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I'm delighted to be joined by 5 excellent customer experience analysts to run through all the latest news from the space. Yesterday, I'm delighted to be joined by Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, Rebecca Wetteman, CEO and Principal Analyst at Valo, Shelly Kramer, Managing Director and Principal Analyst at SiliconANGLE and theCUBE, Michael Fauscette, founder, CEO, and chief analyst at Arion Research. And joining us for the very first time, Simon Harrison, founder and CEO of Actionary. Thank you all very much for joining me, and let's get right on into the news. And let's start with some of the stories coming out of Enterprise Connect, where unsurprisingly, generative AI was front and center. Perhaps some of the most interesting generative AI announcements, personally from my perspective, came from Five9, NICE, and Talkdesk. So Five9 released a Gen AI Studio, which allows contact centers to customize prompts for specific generative AI use cases to optimize their performance. NICE unveiled Enlighten XM, which augments the wider NICE Enlighten suite with additional customer context to improve generative AI outputs. And last but not least, Talkdesk launched a generative AI suite for on-premise contact centers. So lots of really good stuff in there, but it'd be great to hear from you all about which story most piqued your interest and why. Shelly, I know you were at the event. I don't know if you want to kick us off on this one.
Well, of course I'll kick us off. I'm really not sure what event on any continent of any type does not center on AI today. I mean, I know Liz was, so shocked that this is what the focus at Enterprise Connect was. No, I think that was her great acting. But anyway, no, I really didn't have a favorite here. I mean, again, this was all of these, the focus on AI was expected. And, I think that the thing about Five9 that's impressive, they took an early approach here. I think they anticipated customer demand for AI solutions in the contact center. And, they've made some acquisitions along the way that have helped, spur or expand their solution base. And so the Gen AI Studio includes exactly what you would expect. I mean, easy to use, low code, no code, right? All of that. I love the prompt management hub. Being able to use contextually relevant data, I think is important. And really all of this, I don't care if we're talking about Talkdesk, Five9, or NICE, everything is about serving up better customer experiences, better employee experiences in contact center for sure, which is, a crap job, I'm sorry to say, but I mean, it is. So anything that, I in every conversation that I have about contact center, I never forget that I have so much empathy for people who choose this career path because, you wake up every day and, get yourself going. And what you do is, whether you work from home or you work in a contact center office or whatever, you're dealing with people who are having pretty much their worst day or not a great day. And so, how solutions that can make your job easier, that can serve up, data and prompts and that sort of thing, that also track agent wellness, which we see from some vendors. I think these are all important things. So none of these solutions really particularly surprise, but I did love Five9's Gen AI Studio and felt like this is a really cool approach and greater flexibility, greater control. And another thing, their agent assist AI summaries, again, this is not something that just Five9 is doing, right? But, reducing the workload for agents, especially as it relates to work after the call, I think this is becoming table stakes, right? Not exclusive to an offering by Five9, but, things that can make those jobs post-call easier. I think Five9 claims that, their AI summaries can summarize call transcripts in seconds and saves up to 40% of an agent time. So when you start looking at solutions that are delivering on that front, makes the job easier, makes the lift lighter, and speeds productivity and better customer experience all the way around. So cool stuff.
It's interesting when it comes to Five9 in particular. I had a a frank chat with a few of the guys and Nikki as well. One of the things that struck me about their AI, which I'm quite passionate about, because I used to do the workforce engagement management magic quadrant at Gartner. Jim Davies and I used to have a lot of fun with that. And there's 6 characteristics, and the first one is about recruitment and onboarding. And there's a lot of contact center managers out there that will say, oh, I wish I had 100 Janes or 100 Charlies, because they just get it. They're so good with customers. They're so good with figuring out how to get things done in the business. And they just seem to be, the perfect kind of person to be doing that kind of role, and they get a lot out of it themselves. And so I've seen in the past, when vendors doing things to help with Myers-Briggs and all kinds of things to try and, target the best kind of people to do the job. One of the things that struck me was when I was chatting to Nikki in particular. She said, what I thought was exciting about our AI is we could literally claim the strapline. We're making every agent your best agent, because when it comes to their summaries, they're trying to target out. The thing that struck me about the summaries of being they've been up leveled this year. It's all about now not just summarizing, but here's the actions, here's the outcomes, here's the highlights, those kind of things. Sort of categorizing these summaries. But they're claiming that they're doing that quite specifically to a particular agent. So they're saying, this agent's, likely to benefit from this kind of, summary versus someone who's completely different. That was quite profound. And as I say, because I'm I'm passionate about WEM, that did stick in my mind. But it was a really interesting show. We may have mentioned, we may have heard AI a few times. In fact, Esther, still on stage, she made us laugh when she did the Ring Central update. She said, backstage, every time someone mentions AI, they're having a drink. Apparently, they're playing a game.
Oh my God.
Very drunk Enterprise Connect. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that it was a very sloppy event is what that turned into in my head.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's interesting though, to Shelly's point about Five9, because I think they really sort of captured the zeitgeist of the moment, which is we have to meet customers where they are.
Yep.
Right. And for some folks, that's going to mean just prepackaged stuff out of the box, and I don't know or care what's under the hood. For some, it's going to be a much more customized approach where I can get in with low code, where I can swap out models, or at least have the ability to do that. And we have to recognize that customers are really different spaces in the maturity and adoption of AI at this point. And I think Five9 was really out ahead and saying, we're going to give folks some different options so it's accessible at different levels.
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing too there, this Gen AI studio, is I would say we now have a trend. Salesforce announced Einstein Studio 2 weeks ago. Adobe announced, their studio this week. So, I mean, the whole world is moving towards low code, no code AI studios to help, companies really get the most out of whatever they're doing with an assistant or, whether switching out language models, a bunch of different features around that.
Yeah.
But
And could we please name everything Copilot?
because that wouldn't be confusing at all if you, right. No, not at all. No.
But am I the only one that's getting a little terrified about all of it's, not the AI. Like, I don't think it's trying to kill anyone or shoot anyone out the pod bay door. That's not the terrifying bit, right? But all the studios, all the bring your own models, all the low code, no code, like take all the buzzwords together. And it starts to, and then take the buzzwords in contact center and then go ahead and take some glue and take all the buzz in sales, all the buzz in marketing, all the buzz, right? So now we've got all of these little functional fiefdoms with their own studios, training their own models, bringing in their own data, and then they're doing the traditional don't touch my button game of, no, it's my data that's putting my models. And, so I'm beginning to hear the same like digital ramp up of this is all mine and I'm going to train my model with it now. And now I've got my prompt engineering and now I've got my studio. So all of a sudden you start getting this image in your head of, okay, well then whose AI is going to battle in the center? I mean, do we remember the original battles of like, is Einstein, Leonardo, and Sensei going to go and like have some kind of grudge match in the middle of IT to figure out whose, experience focused AI was going to win the digital battles of 2005. Like I keep wondering when we're going to get out of the time machine. It's like literally multiple times this week, every single time I see an announcement come over, I keep thinking to myself, like, hey, 2006 called it would like its thought leadership back, everyone. We've just swapped out digital and we put in AI, and we're heading for the same collision of experience. And that we need to talk about that more, because yes, you can swap out your models. You can pick which model is going to be best, but you know what you can't do? You can't untrain your model. And everybody's like, oh, I can put in my data and I mean, ask Google how much they had to pay to untrain the original model when they stuck all of OpenAI's data in there, right? It's a lot of money. It's impossible to do, and no one's figuring out how to do it. So we're sticking all this data into these models. We're going, oh, this is going to be so fantastic. Let me see my giant list of prompts, and no one's sharing it across state lines. So we've still got,
Don't you think, really, Liz, that's where a solution like Salesforce, I mean, it has...
But they're doing it too.
No, but my point here is that has a little bit of an advantage in that part of their value proposition is that, we're your CRM provider, so sales is using us and marketing is using us and all of this. And, part of the news coming out from Salesforce is that integration across the company as a whole. And I think we're going to see more of that storyline emerging, to your points that you're making, because we can't have these little fiefdoms. And, we've been beating the, digital transformation success relies on breaking down silos, and we're creating AI silos within organizations. So,
but again, it's coming back to this time, Shelly. I think your point's great, right? Because I think we're seeing vendors do that. But what I keep hearing from the C-suite and what I keep hearing from folks implementing this is the interesting thing AI is forcing is a far more significant and substantive strategy conversation of, oh my God, what are we doing with this? So you're seeing CIOs block Gen AI at the door. There's a lot of talk about Gen AI. There's not a whole lot of budget. There's not a whole lot of actual implementation. There's a lot of experimentation. And so when we start to see that shift, this is forcing conversations like the C-suite hasn't had before. I mean, I was talking to a CIO of a major travel organization, and the reality of that CIO's day is, I got to stop everyone from doing this because everyone thinks they can tap into our data warehouse. And that answer's no, until I get a strategy. Like, if you can articulate the strategy to me, the answer's yes. If you can't articulate your AI strategy and your experience strategy in the same articulation, the answer is no.
Yeah. I do think, Shelly, the point you made about the way Salesforce approached this, so I think is really important. The fact that their studio spans all the applications, the fact that they've moved now so that Data Cloud opens up to all the applications, even the acquired products that they didn't have integrated in the platform for many, many years. So I think that's going to be an important part of the story for a lot of companies.
Well, and not everybody can afford Salesforce, right? I mean, I think it's safe to say they're the expensive option, but I think that, and that's really where these, big enterprise players have somewhat of an advantage. I think IBM is trying to do this, connect things, and Adobe's trying to connect things and that sort of thing. But I think that's really where you see kind of potentially an advantage in some ways when you can connect things throughout the organization.
Yeah. I want to go back to Liz's point about AI and strategy for a minute, because I think we talk about that, but so few companies today even have the policies in place, just from an HR perspective, that says who gets to use AI, what AI is allowed to be used. And fewer than 20% have a policy. Even fewer have a training strategy in place to make sure that we're getting people to use this appropriately.
Or guardrails.
Or even before the kind of high-level strategy conversation, we've got to have what tools are we allowed to use, in what areas, with what kind of guardrails, in a way that can be managed like any other HR policy.
Well, and the other thing, though, Rebecca, to your point, this is not about, this is not an IT policy. This is not a CIO policy or CISO policy. This starts at the highest level of the C-suite and the board. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do? And who are all of the stakeholders here? And it includes legal and HR and IT and, marketing and all of these things. And so really and I think that's kind of what we suck at, is collectively is stepping back. That's a technical term, by the way, but stepping back and saying, I know there's a rush to make this happen, but we have to get a foundational strategy in place first. Right. And sometimes holding the masses off is a big challenge.
It's worse. I mean, the reality is that it's a data strategy problem, really. Let's just be clear, the AI models have not really changed in decades. It's the fact that we've now got so much more compute, and we're generating, what is it? I think the stat down was 327 million. What was the stat when I looked at recently?
Make one up. It's fine.
Yeah, it was. Oh my goodness! I just thought to myself, we're creating zettabytes a year, which we're creating, hundreds of zettabytes, and there's 21 zeros in a zettabyte, right? And the real power of AI is using natural language interfaces to be able to do something with all that data. Because normal user experiences, normal applications, it's like looking through the keyhole to get to what is great content that could change the conversation, that could change the outcomes. So the real power of AI is being able to actually use that much data, and the data strategy underpins everything you want to achieve with AI, right? And then when it comes to AI in terms of the technology, really, to your point, Michael and Shelly, I think we've all been saying that you need that abstracted layer of these are the methods you can call that's available to all the applications in your enterprise. And that, because it was funny, I was chatting to Christina Callister from Forrester, and she said, on the customer services side, we're trying to deflect customers and not speak to them. And on the marketing side, we're trying to get to them as much as we can. And it's the same customer.
Right.
So one side of the coin, we're trying to push them, the other side, we're trying to get in touch with them, and it's the same customer. Right? So,
I think ironically,
ironically,
Simon, you brought up. I mean, it's a brilliant point, right? With the deflection and like the attraction, and the deflection. But let's also remember the dirty human meat suits that are in the middle. Our people and our employees. We tend to treat them even worse than deflecting calls, right? Get off the call faster. You're not doing that right. Your emails don't perform.
Butts in seats.
While AI, exactly, like get butts in seats. You're not doing it right. What happened to that lead? How dare you talk to that person for 5 minutes and 3 seconds? Oh my God. Yes, it was their worst day and they were crying. Like the mental model of how we treat people is stunning, right? And then we take technology and we treat them badly faster, which is also a very weird dynamic that none of us want to confront. So I think you're totally right, Simon, right? When you talk about that deflection, we're just going to deflect people faster with AI. What are we doing here? But I think that on top of it being a data strategy, which absolutely amazing point, 100% totally agree. I think at the end of the day, we also have to have that very real conversation of what are we doing? Like, to what end? Because if I'm just trying to make old process automate faster with different data, I'm going to end up in the same darn place. It's amazing every single time.
Only sooner. Right? That's the good news.
Sooner.
Is it'll break sooner.
We get there faster, cheaper. People are going to cry more. That's it. That's where we're going.
But we'll serve them faster. We'll reduce the call time.
One of the bright points for me that came out of Connect was Verint talking about their time flex, talk about an AI that is about treating those poor butts and seats better, right? Giving them tokens so they can bid on shifts, so that they reduce burnout, so they can actually get the schedules they want. There's an example of AI for good.
Yeah. And WebEx has some functionality that's all centered around agent wellness and really monitoring and, being able to tell that, Shelly's had a rough couple of calls here in the last little bit, and we need, the AI powered technology can sense that and say, we need to give her a break. And I think that we need to do more of that. And Liz, you're absolutely right. Again, this is a crappy, stressful job, and there's no way they're making very much money.
It's the worst.
Do you know what? I'm obsessed with, obviously, relentless. As a WebMQ author, I've always been kind of passionate about how to empower. In fact, I used to stand on stage for nearly an hour talking about, how there was the great companies make the execs walk a mile in the lower down shoes. It's a brilliant thing to do. But you know what I found was one of the most compelling features when I was chatting to the Cisco guys? It was around there's summarization capabilities when the call gets dropped. You know, when you find yourself having to call into a contact center and you spend ages queuing and then you spend ages explaining the scenario and then the call drops.
Yep.
It's just like, it's the most devastating thing in the world. You're like, oh my goodness, I now need to do this all over again. And their transcript having that, call drop summary to be able to then reconnect with the customer. Massive fan of that one. That was a great feature.
The thing about the Salesforce announcements that I thought was really interesting was also how deeply they're connecting with players who have very specific skill sets to add to the service platform to offer that full kind of contact center experience, right? Salesforce was never going to go out and master telephony. Like, let's be very real about that. They were never going to go out and be like, I'm going to create my own telephony system for a complete contact center. It's like, no, instead, we're going to build this on the back of Connect, right? Like, if you really you want to get voice, let's go there. And now with their partnership with Genesys, you kind of see Salesforce not just saying, hey, we're going to build this all on top of Power Platform, right? We're going to build this off of a unified schema. We're going to build this off of a unified, composable, containerized architecture to make this fit easily with kind of the rest of your ecosystem. But we're also going to go out and intentionally partner with other tools across the contact center. Because if you want to pick what you want to pick for telephony, if you want to pick email, if you want to pick, whoever has the best mail to, great. You're going to go do that. We think we have the best. You're going to use it all across the Salesforce clouds. But if you really have something else, it's going to fit in here. And I think that is a bit of a different Salesforce strategy than we've seen before, right? And Shelly, to your point, right, it's about bringing all of the clouds together to bring a single customer to the forefront. Absolutely. But I also think that Salesforce has kind of gotten beaten up in the past, and rightfully so, for not necessarily understanding how the rest of the tech stack is going to fit into this equation. And when they came out a couple years ago of like, we're introducing contact center, like, I think we all were like, really? Like, how much of the contact center are you like? I can remember all of us grumbling, right, as we were walking back to the analyst room. Meanwhile, analysts who don't cover contact center, they're like, this is great. They're doing contact center. It's everything. And we're all like simmer down. So I think that these partnerships are really indicative of Salesforce doing something that culturally they have not necessarily done in the past, which is
recognize they're not the be all end all.
It's funny in terms of standardizing AI and having this kind of like, what's our strategy and so on. Omnichannel is still not defined. It's 10 years old.
Oh God, no.
And people are everyone's still got their own view of it. And I remember chatting to the Salesforce guys, and they were like, well, we see omnichannel like this, and this is our interpretation. It just so happens that it's not the same as any other contact center in the world. And it's fascinating to me that whilst it is important to figure out the strategy and to figure out a way to say, right, okay, we've got a methodical approach here. It's not going to stop what's happening. Like, it's just not. There's just this huge race to get ahead, and nothing's going to stop. I think one of the best people I heard speaking in the whole event was Sinead the customer during a panel. It was a brilliant. She just kind of leveled. There was all these vendors that had all these great points of view, and then she would just go, right, let me tell you the reality. It was a great sort of strategic conversation with vendors and enterprise leaders. I thought you couldn't have put it better myself. But the way she described and she put it, and I wrote down this quite precisely. CX is more about brand loyalty, right? Retaining customers. That's the point. You want to empower staff to do a great job of that. So they apply that discretional effort. They feel good about what they're doing. If they feel good genuinely about their jobs, they're going to do a great job of that. But it's more about AI is providing assistive services, right? Human in the loop. Right. And what struck me actually is during this Enterprise Connect, there was a lot less of the whole conversational intelligence, conversational AI to engage with customers through a bot. That was dialed down in my opinion.
Thank goodness.
In fact, Max, literally his entire pitch, I may be oversimplifying, but it basically said, just stick to transcribing and assisting agents really for the moment because why the benefit of trying to make all the conversation intelligence so it's as good as a human being. If we got that far, oh my goodness, the problems we'd create would be extraordinary. So what I guess the headline I'm trying to put out here is, it seems to be we've sort of figured out a few things. There's a few things that have been normalized, and there's a few things, for me, it was more real. There was a lot more discussions using AI that was really valuable during this event that made a difference. And again, focused on that all important employee experience more than anything, in my opinion. And I'll also say there's just a couple of vendors that are thinking that across the enterprise, you have the luxury of having a customer on an inbound contact center inquiry call. First of all, you've got to help them decide to be a customer, and when figure out ways to get them engaged in a way that makes them want to put their hand up and be a customer. And then you've got to go and connect with that customer to help them buy the thing or the service they want to buy. And then you've got the luxury of servicing them. And the reason I talk about this is if I'm talking to BA and I want to change my flight, which happens a lot, when I'm talking to them, I don't want them to reflect on this specific engagement. I say to them, I've spent thousands of dollars with you guys, and I've had this status for years. Does that not mean anything in trying to do me a kindness in trying to move this flight? I want them to reflect on the entirety of me, my customer, my lifetime value, not just what's happening in this engagement. And so I think that the artificial intelligence supporting more of a connected, owning the conversation from them raising their hand to begin with, and then being, deciding that they want to buy something for you, and now in the luxurious position of being serviced, is an important factor. And it all connects, right? An abstracted platform with methods you can call, whether it's a marketing, sales, or customer services engagement, so you don't create technical debt in the sales app or the marketing app or the services app, is the important future that these vendors need to be talking about. And I only saw a couple doing it. RingCentral was one that stood out for me, especially from their keynote, where they actually talked about those other personas, but the others didn't. It's quite interesting.
I think the thing that I think you're right, Simon, and you and I have historically had this conversation. I think we all have had this conversation of, when you talk about experience, it's not just the experience of service or servicing, or the experience of sales or selling, right? That is really across kind of an enterprise-wide team sport. The thing that I'm getting nervous about, and I'm going to be super honest about, we're gonna do something new here. Liz is gonna be super honest.
You're gonna, I was thinking this is a deviation in some way. I don't know.
I'm normally so much more. Yeah. Okay. Peanut gallery. So I think that the thing that's getting me a little, concerned, is when I start to see these moments of when you can clearly see where AI conflict is going to come up, right? That the recommendation that's served up to service is very different than the recommendation for that same. Simon has come in. He's a valued, thousands and thousands of dollars revenue producing, lifetime value, top tier customer. Yet the recommendation that the AI in service serves up for how to give Simon that kindness is drastically different than the one that comes up in a selling motion or the one that comes up in a marketing motion. Like Houston, we have a problem. So that's number one. And that's the challenge and the real thing I'm getting nervous about on the customer side. But there's a real thing I'm getting nervous about, and I want to yell at everybody and tell them to stop it, which is every vendor in every space thinking they can take everybody else's lunch. Just because your category has become a commodity, I'm sorry, try to figure that out, become more strategic, but stop thinking you can do someone else's job, right? And there were a lot of statements, certainly at Summit. I heard the same thing coming out of Enterprise Connect of, well, we already have that, or we already work with omni-channel or multi-channel. So now you can move all of your sales over to service. You can just have this one stack and it's all going to be built on your contact center tool. Or you can move everything over to this marketing automation tool. And all you have to do is have a plugin for telephony. No. Stop it. It's a different thing. It's a different animal. It's different processes. And the problem everyone's having is they're not bothering to do exactly what Simon said, which is, I can't believe I just said that out loud. But anyway, that it actually is about connecting the workflows and the data, right? It not one thing. Like someone at Adobe said, I think it was actually the CFO of Adobe. Actually, so it was actually kind of funny that it's the guy who wants all the money actually said, listen, Adobe can do anything, but we can't do everything. And I think more vendors need to take that, a big sip of that tea, right?
Yeah.
And realize you are not like contact center. You're not going to go in to a CMO and say, hey, you've never heard of us before because we've been stuck down in the operational layer of the contact center, but we could run all your marketing because we already orchestrate journeys.
And we should,
Yeah, we absolutely should be orchestrating journeys, but it's about the workflow. It's the fact that the CMO and the head of the contact center and the CO, the fact that they're not having that conversation, exactly what Simon said, was just talking about, of what happens. See, I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to avoid it actively, but have that conversation of what happened to Simon, right? Like what happened? Like, why didn't we pay him that kindness, both in email, from a marketing lens that meets the marketing KPIs and the objectives that we have, and from service? We're not having that conversation, but darn it, AI is going to like save us from ourselves. Doubtful.
You make a really good point, Liz, that every vendor, I don't care across, I mean, we're talking about contact center, but every vendor wants every organization to have every single operational, I mean, to use only their tech stack. And that's not always a viable solution. In fact, in many cases, it's not at all a viable solution. And I understand why they're all touting that. But it's also dangerous from a customer standpoint, because what if you put all your stuff and your trust in one vendor and it doesn't work out? And then the path ahead really sucks. So I think that you're spot on there. And we need to see vendors slow down on this front.
Yeah.
I think it's also a responsibility of vendors to be not over. I mean, you don't need AI for everything, right? You know, again, Sinead on the stage said,
What?
To book an appointment, I don't need AI. I just need to make it easy to do that, right?
And sometimes it's still just ML.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, machine. Well, you know, NLP, NLU, NLG. It's all up leveled based on large language models, but Gen AI isn't always always an LLM. Just because we're generating something doesn't need to be generated using an LLM.
Mm-hmm.
LLMs are always generating something, so they always become you would always fashion them as a Gen AI solution. But it's just kind of like let's be clear here. Sometimes this transactional thing I want to do doesn't need me to spend so much money and so much time and effort on building something that's just a sledgehammer for a pin. And it's important to, I think, in that vein, where there's the NLP thing has been up leveled based on using large language models to understand intent, and to be able to figure out what it is we want or we want to achieve. But that bit between where we're now looking at how we leverage that to do something cool based on I'm trying to find out more information about a bank loan, or I'm trying to secure a hotel room that's similar to the last one I was in, or whatever, using that company's own data, their specific information, that I didn't hear much of. You know, the vendors don't talk much about, oh, here's how we solve that problem. You know, we had a hotel last week and they have all this content in the website and they have this content in the back office and they've got these legacy systems. And what we did was we plotted a path to training this model to create the guardrails to be more valuable to their guests in this way. And that's something that, you know, I'm starting to really try and sort of dig into from a research perspective. I think it's something we should be able to explain quite clearly. But I don't know about you guys, I'm finding it difficult to explain.
Yeah, lots of really great stuff in there. Lots of great sound bites for me as well with Simon Says and meat suits. But really, really great conversation.
Sorry, I'm just gonna die in the corner now. Sorry about that, guys.
Charlie's trying to wrangle us. We can tell.
I do quickly want to double down on, there was part of that conversation was on Salesforce being at Enterprise Connect. And I do briefly want to talk a bit more about that. So obviously it was there, did release a conversational mining tool, survey summarization tool, and an agent assist offering. And it does seem Service Cloud is becoming more of a CCaaS solution, although it's not openly going out there and saying, hey, this is a contact center solution. So it'll be interesting to think about what are their actual kind of objectives in the space. And I don't know, maybe Rebecca, if you want to, if you have any thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously the Salesforce Genesis partnership is a big one that's gaining momentum. But if you sit down with both of them and say, where do you use Genesis and where do you use Salesforce? There's a lot of, well, we're going to let the customer choose. I'd love to see a little bit more guidance from each of them on where their tech makes sense across the different kind of pieces. But for me, the Salesforce announcement, the really interesting part around generative knowledge creation really gets to that kind of, to Simon's points earlier about the best agent, right? Let me take a conversation or a number of conversations that the best agent has solving a specific problem and use that to generate a knowledge article that really brings these sort of post-it note tribal knowledge into the knowledge base in a meaningful way and does it on an ongoing basis. And for me, nobody says I don't have a problem with knowledge. Nobody says I'm all set with knowledge. My knowledge is fantastic. And this takes a really big step in being able to get, again, to Simon's point, that superstar Liz analyst, let's take 50 of her conversations resolving the same problem with a customer that's trending and get that into the hands of everyone to use. To me, that's a really interesting area.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, think about it. To me, it's sort of the killer app is for contact center, for customer service, is the fact that I can now have an assistant that can find answers, not ways to find answers. Because that's, you need it in real time. You need it. And that improves your agent experience, improves your customer experience, and certainly makes everything more productive and efficient. So.
Well, natural language interface is what this Copilot thing is all about. That's why Microsoft is saying all of their apps are going to be powered by Copilot. Because again, you take your viewport here, your application viewport here, and say, right, well, I know how to search for things, and you turn it into it's an endless supply of, to your point, Michael, straight to the answer I need by just asking for it. Wait a second. What just happened? That's the most important point of this thing. And I will say one other thing. When it comes to, I used to write the Magic Quadrant for customer engagement. I keep on talking about these MQs, and I don't know why I do, but just to validate the point, I did a lot of deep diving on these vendors. And I've always maintained the biggest threat to the CCaaS landscape is the customer engagement center vendors. And I'll tell you why. ServiceNow, Zendesk, all of these guys, they go in to do a demo for a customer. And they show such a deep and rich experience across all kinds of use cases. If I was a CCaaS vendor going in after them, I'd expect the customer most of the time to go, where's the rest of it? Because what they just saw was so much broader and deeper. And in terms of the way people buy when they feel safe, they buy ecosystem, right? Salesforce is a great model, right? Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, speed to value application, open your browser, start using it. If it's not quite pink enough or you want to change it just in a slightly different way, grab an app from the app marketplace using Get It Now and color it pretty. If that's not good enough, go on force.com and build what you think good looks like. Okay. You're not really going to make much of a mistake investing in that ecosystem. And that sort of model, in my mind, is something that should be pervasive across the entirety of the CX sort of application ecosystem, landscape, if you like, where they're thinking about that way, where you've got that kind of, we can co-innovate. We're going to do this stuff together. And to everyone's point here, that opens up the opportunity. It's a co-opetition world, being able to partner. All of that is essential for the buyers to feel safe and to feel like, they've got so many challenges, right? They've got so many applications, and it's like trying to orchestrate a symphony with, different players and different aged instruments and so on, and create something great. It's such a complicated task for a CIO. The vendor that makes it as easy as possible to partner up and to buy into an ecosystem type play is going to be the winner from my point of view. And there's the customer engagement center vendors in particular seem to do that best.
I think with Salesforce, though, in this regard, I think that part of the magic here is going to be how much and how well everything truly does flow across the clouds. I think that we've all worked with Salesforce customers before. And I think the reality oftentimes in Salesforce is there's so much possibility that possibility leads to almost being overwhelmed. So they almost, a lot of times customers, and this really isn't on Salesforce, right? Because I think that Simon, to your point, anyone who has this massive ecosystem play and an even bigger marketplace, I think for those of us who are very used to going and working with our cross-functional partners who take the CIO in with us at the first conversation instead of treating them like a waiter at the last conversation to take our order and go build our stack, right? When we have that dialogue and we have that natural flow and pattern, walking into, like, even if you're net new to Salesforce, walking into the Salesforce ecosystem and saying, I'm going to build my growth engine entirely on Salesforce, and here are the key points of my business. Having that conversation, once you start to use it, and if you're on your own and you're just going through this, all of a sudden you're picking all these things out of the marketplace. Right. Next thing you know, Sally in Poughkeepsie has her own Salesforce implementation because she got the free CRM, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Like, right. I think that a lot of times these really shadow large IT. Plays, they can, like shadow IT and kind of shadow CX. Let's just call it that, right? Yeah. It can spiral out of control really quickly. But I think what I really liked hearing from Salesforce, specific to the offering that they are bundling very specifically, not as service. So I think we have to get out of calling this service, right? What they brought forward at Enterprise Connect was really that bundle of tools and solutions that goes from infrastructure to data to workflows to contact center specific interfaces, and that UX UI canvas for agent and supervisor. That's their contact center solution that sits within the umbrella of Service Cloud. Is it Service Cloud? No, because Service Cloud for one organization could mean ITSM. Right. But in this organization, it might mean contact center. So I think what Salesforce is trying to show is this understanding of a nuance beyond that big cloud header. And I think that's really important, because if you are a Salesforce Sales Cloud customer, you haven't quite yet implemented Marketing Cloud, but your contact center needs to be far more agile and needs to be able to deliver digital experiences as well as telephony-based experiences. You have the building blocks here, right? And it comes back to something we've kind of all been talking about, whether it's around data or whether it's around cloud or infrastructure. It's about having the composability of architecture so that you can abstract data, structure, foundation from your business applications, because everyone wants to move faster. And the lessons that we learned from kind of the on-prem days of everything coming as a big ball on a disk that you slid in, right, is that you can't abstract your actual business applications from your data, right? And that became the big sticking point. So I think with the Salesforce, conversation around, hey, listen, like, okay, if you're an AWS cloud customer and you're a Salesforce customer, suddenly this contact center solution, like, it's kind of answering a lot of your issues, right? Yeah. A lot of your issues around infrastructure. Does it fit? Where does the data go? If you've got all your data in BigQuery, you want to put that in there, but you also want you want a more, elegant looking interface for your agents. You're going to look at Genesis. It gives you options if you have that understanding, Simon, to your point of, this is what's abstracted for the data. Here's where my business applications are. And the biggest issue is, now I know what type of experience I want to deliver, and then let all those pieces come together. And so I think with the Salesforce announcements that they brought out, it was really it was that very interesting approach from Salesforce of saying, yes, we've got an entire kitchen in which you can cook, but hey, for contact center, here's a recipe. And we believe it's a recipe for success, and let us show you how customers are using it. And I think that is that motion that Salesforce needs to be repeating, like, copy and repeat that across every single use case you can come through, because now all of a sudden, if you notice, the reaction to the contact center announcement wasn't, oh my God, what am I going to do with Einstein Studio? It was, oh, here's how I can help my agent. Oh, here's how this translates to the customer. It wasn't about, oh my God, how do I make AI work? Like, how do I abstract all of these models? It was very much, how do I solve the use case?
Yeah, that's the thing that drives me the most crazy, to be honest. It's the internet, right? When we talk about the internet, we don't talk about how it's these peer-to-peer servers that enable you to shift data around and serve it up via a browser. We talk about the fact that I can now, because of the internet, I can now sell products across the world. I can get my value in these remote places.
At the click of a
let's
button.
Focus on. Let's stop using the word AI and talk about the value that we've now created. Let's be more precise about that. What is it that I've now been able to, for Liz to be able to do quicker, faster, easier, because we need to make Liz's life easier, given some of the tweets or X's.
Always.
Do we call them X's? I don't know what we call them now. She's pretty vocal about that. But I think the thing about Salesforce, if we kind of just stick to that, what they're doing is they're solving a lot of these fundamental problems, right? The data problem, the knowledge management problem, to your point, Rebecca, massively important deal. You need a knowledge management strategy, because let's be clear, if you haven't got a strategy and your ability to have the people that are in a position to use this knowledge to be able to update it to the last second, as soon as you've got it, it's out of date. And that is a huge deal. It's got to be reliant. It's got to be relied upon. All of these layers are they are the dependencies for being able to realize the full power of AI. And I think that's where Salesforce has done a good job of solving a lot of those problems as part of their ecosystem, as well as offering up the technology to do better in engaging with a customer and delivering some of that value.
Yeah, lots of really great points there. And even to that knowledge base point, I remember kind of running a survey kind of 4 years ago, and we asked people kind of how up to date is your knowledge base on a scale from 1 to 5, and like the median average was 2.
And that's high.
And that it was a lie. Like they were exaggerating, right?
It's like how much I weigh on my driver's license. Right? No, I think a final point about Salesforce that bears mentioning is that, when you decide to start using Salesforce, it is a complicated process. And most times you don't have the internal resources to do that. You have to hire, an outsourced expert. So two knocks, and I'm a Salesforce fan, and I understand all the good things that we're talking about in the kitchen, and I can cook all this stuff. Great analogy, Liz. But here's the thing. Salesforce is historically one of the more expensive solutions, and it's one of the more complex solutions. And that is problematic. And so if I'm the competition, I'm going to be doubling down on ease of use, simplicity. You don't have to invest in this already kind of expensive solution and then hire a consultant to come in and deploy it. And I think that is an important part of the conversation.
Shelly, you've nailed something, and again, that's important. That underlines this point about natural language interfaces. Imagine if you could just say to your Salesforce environment, set up a Service Cloud environment includes this number of employees, use these features and these workflows, and it listened, and it just imagine all the system administrators that would be rather scared about that fact, right? And
there's no golden hoodie for that. That's the problem.
Right,
you can't give AI a golden hoodie. So
but that's where the world is headed, right? The thing that's baffling to me is how much we trust NLIs, right? If I say, I was in my car once with a this is going back a few years. I said, what's the top 10 songs in the world? And it played them for me. I didn't question it.
It was fact.
What's the top 10 movies in the world? And I went somewhere and got them and listed them out. And I went, that's good enough for me, right? So being able to say to an application, do this, do that, you're going to trust it to a degree, and it's probably going to speed things up in ways that are quite groundbreaking around that complexity, because we have two choices. We either simplify, we dull down, or we make it easier to use that complexity. And that's where I think AI is going to be more powerful.
I think I'm going to do your job here, Charlie. I was at Enterprise Connect and immersed in all of this news that we've been talking about. I'd love to hear more. Obviously I've been tracking the news out of Summit, but would love to hear from those of you who were there more about that.
It's a completely different fire hose. It's prettier, like Firefly colored it. It was awesome.
Oh, well, sure.
But, but here's what I think was the biggest takeaway, at least for me, from Summit. And there are two things. So I'll give you the perspective of what I heard from Summit, and then what the CXOs were telling me at Summit. The big thing is that this is usable, and it's usable today. Yeah. It's enterprise ready. It's enterprise ready today. I think a lot of times when we go into, especially the larger vendors, here's the promise of what everything is going to look like in this new paradigm of all the data, all the opportunity, all the AI, all the models. And oh, by the way, we're going to beta it and it's going to be ready sometime in our Q4, which is actually in 2025. Right. And so now you're sitting there like, well, when can I actually use it? Right. I think that what's really interesting about both the Firefly suite of models, but then also the AI assistant suite of models, because at Adobe, those are two things.
Yeah.
They're connected to the same schema, they're connected to the same data, but it is to essentially multiple suites of services. When you think about Firefly, it's enterprise ready today. And the difference there is it's enterprise ready. It's not just ready for our people to use, it's ready for us to show the world. When you go into a generative image creator, I'll tell you right now, if you're a kitty litter brand and you go into Dolly, or you go and create a video, you go into Midjourney, that cat might have 7 legs. It might have 2 tails, and it might have teeth of a tiger, right? Like when you start to look at it, the output is not necessarily ready for you to use in your brand campaign. But the other part of it is the transparency, what the metadata is, what it was trained on, how it got to that point. That Coca-Cola Red is not actually Coca-Cola Red because I didn't train the model on Coca-Cola Red. That's really important for brands. That's really important for enterprise use. And those other solutions aren't there yet. They're good. Right? Those generative models, they're amazing. Like Midjourney, I love to play with it. I think it's a great solution. So I'm not knocking them in any way. But what Adobe has done has specifically thought about, yes, these models need to be powerful, but they have to be powerful for enterprise use. It's that second part of the sentence that's really, really important. And I would say that it's also kind of what Firefly can create, but the work that's also going into the content authenticity initiative. And I think that content authenticity is probably one of the biggest, like that becomes a really important thing that Adobe, yes, has started, but it is a third-party organization. Anyone can enter it. You've got hundreds of publishers, vendors, social media networks, all saying, yes, we need an ingredient list, right? We need that bill of materials so that we know what went into it, what trained it, what the metadata is of it, and how was it trained, right? And you need to be able to show that. Because let me tell you, a lot of people would have stopped whining about the Kate Middleton picture if there was an ingredient list you could have touched on and that whole thing could have popped up, right? Taylor Swift is having God knows how many images and videos posted of her a day selling weight loss drugs, right? We all know Taylor Swift isn't selling weight loss drugs, kids, but when you're an enterprise, you have to think of those things. And Adobe has really done the hard work. So you had introductions like custom model for Firefly, where you can actually take up to 18 of your images, of your brand assets. You just upload it. It's a simple interface. You upload it, within 45 minutes, the model starts to train on your images, your style guide, your templates. So when you then go and hit generate in something like Adobe Assets, you go into something like Adobe Express, their free tool that can sit in sales or can sit in service, you have something that's trained to your visual, your brand, and it's ready for people to use. The biggest thing that I also heard was also Adobe, kind of going back to something Simon said earlier. And, the reality of today's experience and engagement market is that we have formal engagement hubs and we have informal engagement hubs, right? Very much like how in contact center, we talk about formal contact center, informal contact center. We have that with all of our engagement and experience hubs as well. Does anyone think that sales isn't in Canva creating their own PowerPoint or their own graphics for something? They've been doing that since they could cut things out of paper, right? They like Bob the sales bro in sales is straight up cutting out things and putting it in PowerPoint. So now with tools like Express, with tools like generative AI that have been trained on your enterprise model, Bob can have Express. He can create his PowerPoint and it's all going to be using brand assets that all pull in. So I think the big banner at Adobe was, this is ready for a brand, whether you're a small brand that's using Express or whether you're one of the Fortune 5, you can use this today.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adobe, they do what they do and they do it well, and they make sure you know that, right? They really focused around digital experience. And I think their Gen Studio was one of the best iterations of something I've seen in a long time. I mean, content
Yeah.
supply chain,
Yeah.
insights, campaigns, all of these things. And
Yes.
then, like Liz, like you said, the brand consistency is one of the most difficult things when you're using these tools in most vendors' implementation of them. And I think Adobe's done a great job of making sure that you can get brand consistency across images, across campaigns, wording, all of the content, all those things I think are really important. And then the other thing I liked particularly was their AI assistant now works cross application, which I think is really important. It couldn't before. And the other
Yep.
one, and Salesforce did this too, is this idea of federated data. So in their audience composition, they
Yes.
now have the capability to use federated data instead of having to move all the data into one repository.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
certainly from a data integration standpoint, a data silo standpoint, that's a tremendous benefit. And then I guess lastly, the idea that Journey Optimizer is now B2B tool as well. That's a new
It's so good.
change and
It's
excellent. Yeah, I thought
so
it was
good,
very
Michael.
good.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yep.
AJO, they've
Yep.
done so much work there. And the B2B edition, when you add that to the B2B real-time CDP,
Yep.
really
Really
nice
nice.
moves.
So I thought I thought they hit a lot of home runs out of that.
I was saying I've used Firefly quite a bit, and the whole kind of what comes to mind is the AI taking over humans' jobs and things. It's just like no matter how much I tried to get what I wanted out of Firefly, I'm not artistic enough to get what I want. To be able to create the kind of content that you see a lot of these things created. I needed to be an artist. I need to ask the right question. I need to ask it in the right way. I need to demonstrate a level of expertise. I'm a bit of an application developer myself. I do have a dabble, and I like to test my own skills when it comes to writing code. And it's fascinating to me that when I've practiced with ChatGPT in particular, it will give me an answer sometimes that's so inefficient. I then have to say, no, hold on. There's this method, there's this API, there's this approach, and it will go, oh, you're absolutely right. We should have done that instead, and it will create something far more efficient. And it's the same with this, image creation and creating marketing content. To get the best out of these AI solutions, you need to be an expert in the content you're creating to begin with. And it's a big misnomer that this AI stuff is just.
But here's what I'll say for Firefly and what I'll say for Adobe. I think that when people try to, and this goes for any piece of any generative tool, if you're shooting for the moon, you're really only getting like to the atmosphere, right? Like I think there's a lot, but I think that one of the things that Adobe heard, even from its most seasoned artists on the Creative Cloud side, was that even with AI, they needed some assistance and some guardrails. I mean, it goes back to what we've been talking about today together, right? And so some of the things so they started with Firefly with style and and that kind of style reference. So if you are an artist, you could upload your style, 5 of your last creations. And what Firefly will do is actually replicate what its what its output is in your style. It will analyze the composition, analyze the lighting, analyze the color. But now what they've introduced, and it's available today, and so many people were playing with it. And as someone who knows Creative Cloud and who uses it and has created in it, oh my God, I almost died. Honestly, I screamed. Like I cursed out loud in the keynote, was structure reference. So I can put in there, I want someone looking at the side. I want someone looking straight ahead. I want something that's looking straight down. Here's the actual structure of the image that I want you to replicate. Yeah. And that's what it comes back with. So it's starting to, and again, to all of our points, it's starting to put the guardrails so that you can start to say, okay, yes, here's this thing that I have in my head. You can doodle it, literally upload it into Express, the free tool, right? Hit that text to image, and it starts to look at what you doodled and say, hey, did you mean this? Like, hey, did you mean that? So I think, again, it's about how do we have better guardrails by people who are hyper creative, and the things that creatives can now do with this, amazing. But to Michael's point, because of AI Assistant, if you're in Journey Optimizer, it will automate the creation of different journeys and experiment on them for you. So all of a sudden, when you start to look at journeys, you can look back at a history of the past 10 campaigns that you've run. And it could say that journey you just thought is going to work because your gut told you, it's never worked in the past and it's never made $1. Like, it's getting to that point where it's automating those journeys. So you're not doing the drag and drop. You're not putting the stop sign in, right? But add that on top of the other drop they have, which is content analytics. Now, all of a sudden, you're sitting there saying, and the AI is up-leveling in Copilot, because that's the other thing they announced, Copilot partnership with Microsoft and Adobe. I can be in Outlook and ask my Copilot, hey, in our last 10 campaigns, which was the most effective asset that we use that costs the least to produce? And it's up-leveling in Outlook, pulling out of Adobe, so you can have those substantive conversations when your CMO calls you and says, why are we wasting all this money creating all these new images? Isn't this like, we already created this $1 million image? I can now go back and be like, that $1 million image was a flop. This $5,000 co-created with our customer's image nailed every single campaign. And it auto then creates the journey and the assets and 5 examples of what we should be sending out. That's the ultimate assistant, because now it can also push it out to sales through Copilot. Right. So we're starting to see those silos crack. I think it's really interesting that it's Adobe that's helping us crack those silos. Because let's be honest, like old Adobe was kind of part of the problem. Like, I love them dearly, but like, oh my God, they were part of the problem. So I think that that's what we're seeing. So it's that AI assistant that blew my socks off. Firefly's cool.
To your point, Liz, I think that, old Adobe and all this conversation, I think that in some ways, Adobe has some of the same challenges that Salesforce has, because there's this brand perception of, I'm a, big agency solution. It's an enterprise solution. It's expensive. You have to have certain creative chops and knowledge and everything else. Well, Canva just acquired Affinity for $380 million. And you know how easy it is to create using Firefly? Let me tell you, it's also easy to create using Canva. And so I think that, really part of your message about this was so easy to do using the free version. I think Adobe really needs to double down on the messaging that we don't just serve the big creative shops and the big enterprises. And we have solutions that expand across mid-market, SMB, and more affordable, because it is a brand perception issue, I think.
But I also don't think they're ever going to be an SMB shop. Like that really is kind of the sweet spot, and so I think that there's like right-sized tools for right-sized places.
Yeah. But I think there's a big mid-market there too.
There's a huge mid-market, and I totally agree with you. And I think that's where like Adobe is leaning in, and I see them leaning in an awful lot on kind of what has traditionally been a mid-market tool, like out of their commerce solutions. And they're actually trying to up-level their commerce solution into an enterprise solution, right? Which is kind of funny to watch. I think the reality is that there are just some tools that for the enterprise, you're going to pry out of my cold dead hands, right? Adobe on the creative side of that business is usually one of them. But I think that what is really important, and we heard it from David Wadhwani, and we heard it from Mainstage, and we heard it from a lot of key people at Adobe, is historically part of old Adobe has been a hard and fast line in between Creative Cloud and Marketing Cloud, because creatives and marketers can't possibly work together in one room without killing each other, right? Like, there's been this cloud separation and very thick lines keeping those clouds together. This year, and Michael, to your point, the introduction of a new SKU of Gen Studio blurs the lines between the clouds. So you're now having an enterprise-ready solution that can actually be applied in the mid-market. It is not wildly expensive, but it blurs the lines because it takes you all the way from Frame.io and creation all the way through to deployment, right? With Adobe Journey Optimizer. And I think that perception, because you're absolutely right, Shelly, the perception has been, it's large, it's complex, I need a lot of money, and I need an SI to make this happen. Like, I'm not getting this in without Accenture. With things like Gen Studio, with things like Express, you're starting to see that culture change. But here's the interesting thing. You're starting to see partners dig it too. right? Because partners have been saddled with that old perception as well. So even in partner day, people were like, I'm going to suggest Express to get this all out there. So I think you're right. The perception issue is definitely being addressed, but that's being addressed by the blurring of the cloud lines. And that needs to keep happening.
Yeah,
I think it raises an interesting point about the economics of these businesses. Right, you look at AI. If Google's AI solution works so well, the bottom just dropped out of its search revenue. Right, the Adobe stock revenue is significant, and they've got to manage that balance. Right, so if you suddenly just you're negating the need for that. You need to find a balance. You still have shareholders. You still have a stock price to maintain. And so, as much as we need to, you're right. It needs to be economic. We need to find scale, economies of scale, so you can take care of the smaller companies at a less, more efficient price. But there's the opportunity to manage the balance across the books and still maintain the revenues that the company needs to achieve.
And I would say companies need to follow what Adobe has kind of done, right, with stock. Because you brought it up and you're like, oh, stock, the revenue is significant. It is, but that's not the value of stock anymore. And that's the funny part of this. The value of stock to Adobe is that's its training data.
Yeah.
That's where it's training its AI. It's not training its AI on the open web where you now go on an interview where your CTO says, I don't know where it came from. Right. It was like the worst interview. Like, oh my God, that's not what's happening at Adobe. Adobe's training on literally licensed imagery, stock.
That's huge.
So to your point earlier of data is at the center of AI, Adobe understood that stock was its data. And so when you start to talk about other vendors who are getting into this AI game, you got to think, what do you have today that should be considered data that you've never considered data before? And stock is data. And so for them, that's how you're going to reduce the cost, right? Because you already have license, permission, you're already compensating creators. So for creators who went into the training model, they got credits put back into their account to literally compensate them for being part of the training. They've now got an ongoing fund that continues to pay creators that put their data into stock and allow it to be part of the training model. And I think that's the business model we're going to see more of, right? How do we compensate creators of data to be part of our enhanced trading models rather than saying, hey, everyone, come play with it because that's how we're going to enhance what we're doing. Charlie is like, oh my God, I need to put a hook on these people because we're now 13 minutes over. And he's like, oh, how am I going to edit this?
I felt like another conversation was starting there with how you buy data from people. So I was thinking, oh no, okay, maybe I should cut in there to end today's chat. But it's been a really great conversation. We covered so many topics. So appreciate all of you joining me today, and also everybody for watching. Bye for now.